Hi, I'm Lara Waldman, and today I'm going to share how I stopped sabotaging myself. I've had to overcome a lot behind the scenes in order to create the life, the business, the finances that I truly desired. And I thought today I would share more vulnerably with you some of the behind the scenes challenges that I've had to overcome, the inner game, the inner journey of creating outer results. And I know there's some of you who are also struggling with self-sabotage, and you're hiding in the shadows of shame around some of your behaviors. And I want to normalize some of that for you and name the shame and create a safe space to help you really see and identify what's going on to support you to transform it. I know there's some of you who may be over drinking, overeating, taking drugs, having unhealthy relationships around sex, for example, watching too much TV, overworking, even over exercising, not exercising. There's all sorts of ways that we self-sabotage. And I want to help you with a simple but effective process to overcome anywhere that you are consciously or unconsciously self-sabotaging that is stopping you or blocking you from moving forward, taking that aligned action and creating the results in your life, your business, and your finances that you truly, truly desire. So I've always been someone who is very ambitious. I'm a big dreamer. I have big visions. I have big dreams and desires. I always have. That's been how I've been since I was a teenager. And yet at the same time, I had very strong ways that I self-sabotaged. It took me a long time to overcome some of these things. And I was very unconscious and very blind around some of my behavioral patterns. But one of the first things that I started to do was to really hurt and harm myself when it came to my relationship with food. Essentially, I had a very wounded relationship with food. I had eating disorders, and I'd go through experiences of great denial, creating a lot of restriction, a lot of rules around my eating. And then I would break those rules and binge eat and go into these cycles of feeling terrible about myself. I would have these really strict rules, and then I would break them, binge eat, and go into these looping of incredible self-punishment and self-harm using food. I've done it with drugs as well, having addictive cycles and patterns with smoking weed every day, for example. I've had it with alcohol at times as well, drinking too much. I have not ever been addicted to things like, heroin or cocaine, but I've had subtle ways that I self-sabotage in my life. And what I've found is that when I go into deep self-judgment and self-criticism, it keeps me in that cycle. It keeps me stuck in that cycle. And I if I was really hard on myself and I was really self-critical and I beat myself up enough, that somehow would change my behavior. And for me anyways, it didn't. It just dug my heels in even more. So over time, I had to find a way to essentially trick myself into change, because if I tried to fight myself head on, it just didn't work. I'd start the day with great intentions. Today's the day when I'm going to eat really well and I'm going to exercise and I'm not going to do those patterns that make me feel bad. And then often by the end of the day, I would go back into these hurtful, harmful patterns again, then feel horrendous, wake up feeling terrible about myself, and the cycle would continue. A lot of mental energy, emotional energy on feeling so bad about myself. Now, of course, all of this was going on secretly. Most people in my life didn't know about it. And so I was deep in shame and deep in a lot of pain that I didn't know how to get out of. I remember there was a time where I thought that the greatest freedom would be to not have to think about food. And I couldn't believe that there was people that would go through the day without thinking about food. I could not stop thinking about it. I was obsessing about it constantly. It took up so much mental and emotional energy. So it was very, very debilitating. Now I got to a place where I now have the most beautiful relationship with food, and it doesn't dominate my life. And it sort of seemed to happen magically and almost overnight. and without any effort. And yet, of course, behind the scenes, it did take some time and some effort. And I wanted to share with you what I did to shift that and what I've done to shift any behavioral patterns that I've wanted to change, but haven't been able to change. So I jokingly say I'm a natural born rebel. So if I make rules for myself, I will naturally rebel against them. And so there's a part of me that, wants to do all the healthy, positive habits and behaviors. And there will be another part of myself that kicks in to rebel against that. I got my little naughty, wild child, which I love, but she also needs to be kept in check sometimes. So I want to share with you my step-by-step processes, how to overcome self-sabotage. Please know that this is not a replacement for professional care and support. It's really important that you receive support, that you seek professional support with anything that is really becoming very destructive in your life. But this is something that you can do as support, alongside of seeking professional care and support. And it's a nice thing to do, especially if you're trying to get ready to make some changes in your life. So here's what I do. When I'm in a cycle, or when I've been in a cycle of self-sabotage, doing actions or behaviors that I do not feel good about and I do not want to be doing, and that I know are out of alignment with where I want to be going, right? So I'm connected to that future self that has manifested the results that I want, and I tune in and ask, is my behavior and actions now aligned with where I'm going? And usually it's not, because deep inside we know when we're doing behaviors that aren't actually in alignment with where we want to be going. So what I first do is I connect to that future version of myself that is no longer doing those negative self-sabotage patterns. I tap into that future self. How are they? How are they feeling? How are they being? For example, on the food issue, what is their relationship like with food? Or if it's things around drugs and alcohol or other sorts of behaviors, you can tune in. What is life like without that? How are they feeling? How are they being? What are they doing? And you start to get a sense of that future you that has liberated yourself from these negative habits and behaviors. So that is step one, connect to the future version of yourself. Now, coming back into present, what's incredibly important is to move into a space of what I call the loving witness. So the first thing you need to stop doing is beating yourself up, right? All the negative self-talk and the negative criticism. Witness where you're doing that, but you need to invite yourself into a place of the witness. So you want to start to witness yourself in what you're doing and how you're doing it, bringing consciousness to some of your actions that may be happening quite unconsciously. You may be doing things on default without even thinking about it. So you want to bring the witness in, witnessing yourself doing certain behaviors and removing the critic, removing the judgment. For me, the judgment and the self-criticism locked me into even deeper negative cycles. So that was the first step, to stop the criticism, to stop the self-judgment, to stop that self-harm, and just witness, and just witness. So even when you're doing the habits, or even when I was doing those habits that I didn't want to be doing, I would be witnessing them. And then every day tapping into or connecting into or just paying attention to that future version of me that is no longer doing it. That's step one, right? And giving it space, giving it some space. Now, underneath those habits of behavior, there will be something else going on. So if and when you're ready, you can ask, what is happening underneath this behavior? What is the feeling that is going on beneath this, which is usually hiding in the unconscious? So I would ask myself, what is the feeling that is going on that this sabotaging behavior is trying to cover up, trying to protect, trying to numb, trying to avoid? What is the feeling that I'm not wanting to feel? And I create a safe and loving space just to breathe with the feeling. And sometimes before, if I knew I wanted to take an action that was my self-sabotage action, I'd just take a minute and go, okay, what's the feeling? Before you take the action, you can still take the action, but what is the feeling that you're not wanting to feel? What's the feeling that you're trying to avoid? Maybe that's anxiety. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's overwhelm. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's frustration, right? Maybe it's some very, very deep, buried feeling inside of you that you don't even know of yet. So that is the next step, is to hold a safe space to allow yourself to feel what is in there. And this is often where it's important, or you may need support. You may need facilitation, a safe space to help you feel what you don't want to feel. Because essentially that sabotaging behavior, at least from my experience, is trying to numb or trying to protect a feeling. And it's a very hardwired habit as well, right? It's sort of a default behavior pattern that kicks in. So I create a safe space to feel the feelings, which obviously doesn't feel very nice in the moment. And once I connect to the feeling, and once I connected to that feeling, I'd ask that part of myself, what do you need? What do you need? What support do you need? And this is usually very vulnerable. This deeper need is usually lying in vulnerability, in sensitivity, in a part of you that may feel unloved, unheard, unheld, a part of you that may have experienced hurt and harm from the past. It's a very vulnerable part of the self that actually doesn't know how to be in life. So we need to go in and learn to hear this part, hold this part, honor this part, acknowledge this part, and start to do our best to listen to what it needs. And listen, stay curious, stay open. And eventually it may not be ready right away, but you can start asking, oh, how can I meet that need? What can I do to meet that need? What are ways that I can self-soothe that actually really support what I really need, right? There's that surface level action that's trying to numb or protect. But if we go right under it, right under this part of yourself, what can support you? You may not have an answer yet, but what you're doing is going under that habit, under that pattern, diving under the emotion and learning how to hear yourself and hold yourself on a whole new level. Usually in here is a part that has not been met before, a part of yourself that hasn't been heard before, hasn't been held before. And so you're learning a deep practice of self-love, if you will, self-care, self-honoring, and learning how to look after yourself. So this is obviously a process, and there's going to be steps in which you can meet yourself. And there's going to be lots of wobbly, imperfect moments. But what I found is that over time, when I was willing to consistently show up to being the witness, removing self-criticism, feeling the feelings, going under that feeling and asking what I need, and what is that aligned action of support that can help me and hold me through that, while also connecting in and tapping into that future version of me to show me where I'm going or what life might look like beyond these habits, beyond these self-sabotaging patterns. Slowly but surely, what I found is some of those old habits of behavior drop away. Or at some point, I just made different choice. And somehow those addictive cycles just kind of started to melt and dissolve away. Not overnight, in some cases over months, and in some cases over years. But I found that when I consistently showed up with the intention of wanting to live from that future version of myself that was no longer doing that, and learning to hold myself in the present, free from judgment and criticism, from a place of witnessing, from the willingness to feel, and learning how to hold myself and meet my needs, and also get support, because I don't believe we're meant to do this alone, right? Maybe that's professional support or some kind of self-care, something that you need, right? Over time, we can start to shift and break some of these habits and cycles. And remember, a lot of this is just default behavior. So the more conscious you can be And the more present you can be, the more mindful you can be, the more aware you can be that essentially you're just trying to avoid having a feeling. And that feeling can be so overwhelming that it feels like the only solution is to go into these cycles of behavior, and you start to create safety for yourself. Shifts start to happen, change starts to happen. And that's when it feels kind of miraculous, right? Or like magical manifestation. You've actually been chipping away slowly but surely to rewire yourself, to reprogram, to change the way you're thinking, to change your habits and change your behaviors. So I've used this process time and time again in all areas of my life. So if you notice yourself self-sabotaging, right? If you notice yourself doing an action that you don't want to be doing, or not doing an action that you want to be doing, a similar process applies. Get clear on the vision, get clear on what you want, stay present and witness where you are now, remove the critic, the judger, right? Because that is a type of self-harm. That's like being in an abusive relationship with yourself. That is not okay. We need to stop that cycle of abuse, witness, breathe with the feeling that you don't want to feel, right? Hold that part of you, tune in and listen. What support do you need? One of my favorite questions is, who or what can support me with this? Remembering that you are not alone and you don't have to do this alone. That support may not be available right away. There might be, you might feel you can't afford it, or you don't know who, you don't know what. But again, we are manifesting the right support for you with this as well. You want to hold the space and be patient with yourself. Change is a process. Change doesn't always happen overnight, but at some point you might find, the penny drops and you just make a choice, right? Change starts with a choice. But sometimes it takes time before we can simply make that choice. Please be kind. Please be patient with yourself. And lots of self-love, lots of self-love. And within this, very powerful shifts can start to happen, one gentle, loving, patient step at a time. Thank you for joining me for our conversation today, how I stopped self-sabotaging. I would love to know what landed for you in today's conversation. If you feel like sharing anything that you've done or you've been doing that you would like to shift and change, I would love to hear in the comments below. I know this is very vulnerable. Here we are creating a safe space to name the shame. I want you to know that you are not alone. And especially if you've got big goals, big dreams, you want to really transform your life, these sabotaging patterns can really kick in sometimes. So remember to get the support you need, and please reach out if you'd like to share anything more with me. I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed today's content, like this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel for my weekly teachings, trainings, masterclasses, and activations. I look forward to being with you again next week on Wealthy Wednesday.